It's okay anyway, it's not a big difference.
For about 30 minutes after the end of the sessions, there'll be breakout groups where you, excuse me, sorry. There'll be breakout sessions where you can speak to a scholar with some kind of deeper understanding of the issues, perhaps. So you're going to be divided into groups.
No, okay.
And does everybody know which group they're in?
We're going to send the group information, but they should all have it in the virtual program. Everybody's in a group. We're going to resend it to everyone.
Okay, thank you. And the breakout sessions are after the last course at 6 o'clock?
Oh, it's okay, let's do it with
It's
this.
scheduled for 30 minutes, but you can actually, if you have an interesting conversation or debate, you can stay longer.
It's my fault.
The other thing that I wanted to mention, which I guess is in the program, I know many of you are actually working on issues of anti-Semitism in your scholarship. So if you would like to present to colleagues, I think speak to Daphne, if that's okay, Daphne, and you can sign up. And in the past years, we actually had a very good turnout where people could kind of present some of the work that they're doing or they're considering to do, and you can kind of make a presentation, informal presentation, and get some feedback from intelligent, good colleagues. So if you want to sign up for that, that will take place in the evening. It can take place Monday to Thursday this week, and Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday next week. So speak to Daphne, and those sessions are informal, but they've been really kind of creative and good spaces. Okay.
One last PSA. If you're by any chance not in a group, let me know and just let me know. You should all be in a group, but if you're not, how would we know if we're not?
When did you sing it?
You're not going to see your name. But I know
So not the first, it's okay. It's okay. If you're not the first bit, it's okay. Okay. Can I close this?
Here, hold on. Let's go. X.
So I emailed Daphne for one citation for your study.
No, it's okay. It's
There, this one, yeah?
Yeah.
I'd like to follow up and
And this may be also smaller.
This one?
Yeah.
There you go.
You're the best.
All good.
It's almost the same. It's 95%.
Oh, then we're good.
You're 95%.
Yeah. When you're ready, just click play, and it'll go to the next slide, okay?
When I'm ready, what?
When you're ready, just click play.
Okay, okay. If anyway you hear it. So I'm safe.
You're safe. But you should be fine, yeah?
Yes, of course.
You've done this plenty of times. Just don't touch this yet. Charles, we're ready when you are.
Okay, cool.
So, again, play. Just click play.
Okay.
But not now, because this page will go
I'm
away.
old,
After this
But
page.
it's okay. I'm still young. We had like a very interesting conversation. I mean, like disagree. I was like,
That's good. I like disagreeing.
yeah.
Okay, everybody, we're going to begin. You guys,
Where's
please
my
be
daughter?
quiet. Okay.
There she is.
So today, our next session is with Joel Kotek. The title of the talk is Antisemitism as Conspiracy Theory from the Judas Affair to COVID-19.
Yeah.
Joel has been with us every Summer Institute. You guys please stop talking. Joel's a professor at the Free University in Brussels and at the Institut d'études politiques de Paris. He's also a member of the scientific community, including the Revue d'Histoire de Shoah, the historical review of the Holocaust of Shoah, the Jewish Museum of Warsaw, and the Mechelin Holocaust Museum. He's also working with the foundation of Aladdin, which does amazing work bringing Muslim intellectuals and leaders to learn about the Holocaust. They were doing cutting edge work, kind of pre-Abraham Accords work that turned out to be very important for all sorts of reasons. And he's with the Evans Foundation in Antwerp and Yad in UMM in Paris, and the head of the formation department of the Memory of the Shoah of the Center of Documentation Juif, Contemporary Judaism in Paris. Joel is also a correspondent of the Moshe Cantor Center of Antisemitism from Tel Aviv University, and he's authored many important publications and books, including la Shoah dans les bandes dessinées.
Comic strip.
Huh?
In comic strip. Holocaust in comic strip.
In comics. And he's been a fellow, senior research fellow with us for years, and it's really an honor that Joel took the time out of his schedule to be with us today. So Joel, the floor is yours. So Joel will speak for how long?
1 hour.
Okay.
And anyway, my English is so bad,
For 30
better
minutes?
no discussion
Joel will
anyway.
speak for 30 minutes. Okay. And then, so when Joel's finished, we'll have Q&A, and if you kind of motion to me, I'll keep a list and try to include as many people in the Q&A.
Yeah, we will concentrate. Because as I said yesterday, you know, I am a French speaker, so my English is different from yours. So let's speak about, it's not really my last presentation because I don't know, so it's another title that I wanted, it's almost 95%. So I will be long, but as I said, I'm coming from Belgium. Belgium is the country of comic strip, Tintin, if you heard about him. And so I'm a collector of anti-Semitic caricature, cartoons, as I said, till the Middle Age. And I think it's going to help us to understand the very, not mysterious, but very interesting, questioning concept of anti-Semitism in all aspects. So I have to first to play. And so the first thing, which maybe it's a little bit different of what we heard yesterday, and which seems to be, I think, extremely important to notice, is the fact that there are no historical inevitability of hatred of Jews. And this is very important to say, because the hypothesis of an endless anti-Semitism has no historical, I say no historical foundation. As I said, I'm an historian. In pre-Christian North Africa, in China, in India, Jews has not suffered from any particular discrimination, as far as we know, of course. And the fact is that the Jews of China disappeared from assimilation. And what is more important than China, and I would say India, is the Roman Empire. Contrary to what we believe, despite the fact that there was a war between Judea as a state and the Roman Empire, there were no anti-Semitism as such. But of course I have to define what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is the belief that the Jews are responsible of the misfortune of the wars of the world. No Roman consul, no Roman would ever think that the Jews were responsible of the disaster or whatsoever problem, earthquake of course there was a war. And of course they destroyed the Temple of Jerusalem. But as a Jew, you can be a senator. As a Jew, you can receive, you know, from the administration of Rome, free bread, and you could go to the circle, to the cirque, if you wanted, etc. And this is very important to stress. Of course, there is an animosity, and this is what I called anti-Judaism. Of course, the Romans, they were astonished by the Jews. The Jews were, as you know, atheists. They don't believe in a God, or actually as a normal God, you know, so they believed they were atheists. They also believed that the Jews were lazy people. You know why? Because they invented Shabbat. And so they were considering as a lazy people. Also, they considered the Jews as a very strange people. They didn't kill their children if they were disabled, in the name of the fact that the respect of the life that the Jew had. But for the rest, there was a kind of admiration for the Jews. What's the proof? Finally, the Roman Empire converted to Judaism, to Christianity, which is, as you know, a kind of declination of Judaism. So there was a kind, and you know that one of the wife of Nero, she was a pre-Jew, because they exist. And at this time, there were a kind of, how would I say, there was possibility for Romans, for pagans to become Jew, etc. So the important thing to remember is there is no responsibility of the Jews in the rejection of which they are subject. And this is important to stress, especially when I give my lectures. And so one shouldn't confuse between, as I said, anti-Judea as a state. Of course, they were hostile to Judea as a state, and anti-Semitism. And one shouldn't also confuse, and this is the core of what I want to tell you, between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. Anti-Judaism is the fact that you don't like the Jews for what they are, for their religion. And anti-Semitism, you don't like the Jews for what they are not. It means near to the devil, people who want to destroy you, who brings you diseases and whatsoever, catastrophe. And the difference between also anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism, on one side you have contempt, on the other side you have fear. The anti-Semite, they fear the Jews, not the anti-Judaic. So the second thing also, which seems to be important to start with, is the fact that the Jews always will to integrate, the will of integration, not assimilation. This is different, but to integrate, and it means it will be more the right to resemblance rather than the right to difference. And this is important to stress. And what is important to stress too is the fact that when the Jews are very well integrated within society, like in Alexandria in the first century of Christian era, or it will be in Germany, or it will be in France in the 19th century, or it will be in Spain, Christian Spain or Muslim Spain, there you will find the crisis, I would say the apex of persecution, etc. And this is a paradox, but also an interesting thing to... And those are Jews. Those are Jews, and they're not Hasidim. You've got Jews from Dura Europos today in Syria, Hellenistic Jew dressed as, as Greeks. There you've got Jews from India, Jews from Africa, Jews from Morocco. He looks like a Muslim. He's a Jew. Jews from the Turkey, Ottoman Jews dressed as, and Chinese Jews and European Jews. And how do we know he's a Jew? Because he's got a special la rutella. He's got, a way that allow to distinguish him from the rest of the population, which means that the Jew does like as the population will live. My God, this is really the best of what I could do. And this one is the German Jews of the 16th century. And this characterization of the Jew, the fact that you can see a Jew and to differentiate from a non-Jew, was invented actually by the Abbasid regime in the 7th century in Baghdad. All Christian has to wear a yellow scarf, a blue scarf, and the Jew a yellow scarf. So it's quite old, the fact that you had to differentiate Jew from another Jew. Then I will show you a beautiful sermon soldier. Why? A perfect one, who was, put in the front page of a monthly magazine in Germany after the victorious campaign against Poland. Why would I show this gentleman? Just because, well, it happens that he was half Jew, that his father was Goldberg. And of course, when they discovered that he was half Jew, he was immediately expelled from the army. But because he had half Aryan blood, Aryan of course in Tacoma, he was not killed. He was just put in an ammunition fabric, etc. Despite the fact that the Jew looks like the population where they live, of course, they invented what we call the Jewish face. And this is a characteristic. It was 1907, 1904, 1905. And this is how a Jew should resemble, with the characteristic, special nose, special lips, special whatsoever, etc. And of course, why they do it, circumcision, and also what they do to the children, they do it with the gold money, etc. And classical representation of the Jews, one Russian, and the other one Austrian, etc. And of course, this will print within the mentality of Europeans whatsoever, and this is how you represent Jews itself. Then, of course, you've got the question. I'm sorry that I use those words, the monkey, the kike, and the nigger, and this was before the First World War. And the question is, to whom looks more like a monkey, the Jews or the Africans? But contrary to what you believe, it's the Jew. Well, despite the fact that he's dressed like us, he's nearer the ape than the African, etc. And this is within, of course, a fake Darwinian conception. And so the third thing I want to stress on is the fact that anti-Semitism is a cultural code. It means that affect even society without Jews. You don't need Jews to have anti-Semitism. And the best thing that I try to teach to my students is the fact that despite the fact that Hitler used anti-Semitism to come to power, there were, and I ask you, how many Jews you believe there were in Germany in 1933? There were 60 million Jews, 60 million Germans, etc. How many percent? And they will say 10, 20, 30% of Jews, etc. They were less than the percent, less than a person. And this is important to say. So contrary to racism, it's not a question of percentage. It's just the fact that one Jew in certain societies is too much, is too many, etc. And the fact also that we have to stress, even the fact that we survive, etc., that we're still there, what is important to stress is the fact that in 1939, there were 11 million Jews in Europe. 11 million Jews. How many are left today? 1.2 million. 90% of the Jews disappeared from Europe. 90%. Most of the people that I met never met a Jew in his life. Sometimes I'm the first one, because Hitler won his war against the Jews. He lost against the democracy, thank God. He won against the Jews. There were, as you know, I'm originated from Poland. There were 3,300,000 Jews. There are 6,000 Jews left, etc. Look how many Jews are still in Ukraine, how many Jews are still in Russia, etc. And this is very important to say. And when I say it could happen in society without Jews, and of course, as I characterize anti-Semitism as a psychosis, as a disease, of course it's funny, because, you know, it's a delirium, and delirium is quite funny, etc. And this is an example. This is a so-called, but I'm not sure, he's an historian, a so-called Japanese historian who said that Enola Gay, you know, it was the name of the plane who sent the atomic bomb to Hiroshima, that the name Enola Gay means in Yiddish, kill the emperor. You need a brain of a crazy man. But what he said, the book was printed, and it was read. And some people believe about a Jewish responsibility of in Hiroshima disaster, etc. The same with, I'm a friend of Rwanda. I'm a specialist in genocide. So of course there are a lot of fantasies and conspiracy theory about the fact that the Zionists and the Tutsi are allied to control Congo, etc. And this is one example to show. And there are 100 Jews in Rwanda, 100 Jews, mostly Israeli, etc. Of course. And so, difference with ordinary racism and xenophobia. Well, what is anti-Semitism? But not anti-Judaism, which is different. But anti-Semitism, it's first of all a conspiracy theory which aims to designate the Jews as an evil entity and mostly superior race. Nobody will say the Jews are inferior. Maybe some will say, but they are superior. They are, and that's why they fear the Jews. You don't fear, you despise the inferior, but you fear the superior. Why they're superior? Because they are connected with the devil. They've got special way of controlling you, etc. And this started from the Middle Age, but not the early Middle Age. The Middle Age after the 12th century, and this I will explain to you. There was a cultural shift, etc. And then you see, you know, the Jews, of course, and how you recognize the Jews? The special head. Because you had the rutella or you had the head. And those are, of course, dedicated to be in hell, for sure. Again, a fantastic. And so those are posters that were printed during the war, you know, and you can see the Jew is an evil by definition, etc. And this is the cover of Kladera Dutch, who used to be actually a satirical Jewish magazine, but of course who was taken by the Nazis in 1933, and this is the last edition in 1944, after there will be a shortage of paper. And you can see the German knew they lost the war. It's finished, they know. But why? Because Roosevelt was allied with the Jewish devil, etc. How could you win against those people? It was impossible, etc. So anti-Semitism is, first of all, a conspiracy theory which aims to designate the Jews as responsible for the world's misfortune, and they are the real master of the world. And so the very famous motto that you can find in Germany in the 19th century was this sentence, this motto, Die Juden sind unser Unglück. It means they are our misfortune, etc. And God knows that Germany was not in so bad condition, economical and such, and scientific at the end of the 19th century, but still, the Jews were responsible of the what went wrong. And of course, you know, classical thing, the Rothschild, etc. And this will bring to the conspiracy theory and what we call the Protocol of the Wise of the Elder of Zion, etc. The Protocol of the Elder of Zion, this is different kind of cover. And you can see that the Jew is not a question, he's not a human. He's a Gegenrasse. He doesn't belong to humanity. It's, well, how would I say, it's a nuisible. It's like an insect, etc. So someone you can destroy with no fear, etc. Connected to the devil, etc. So it's a question. And then, of course, you will have the Judeo-Masonic conspiracy myths. The fact that the Jews, and this is a 1942 or 1943, I think, posters in Serbia, and depicting the Jews as, manipulating both Stalin and Churchill. And there were almost no more Jews there. They were all killed. But who cares about the fact that Jews still exist, etc. And this is a contemporary. It's exactly the same ideas. The fact that Netanyahu, who is definitely not my friend, creating, inventing Daesh, ISIS, and provoking, fake flag, bombing in Paris, etc. And this is the same idea. The Jews are controlling the world. They are controlling all the people, etc. And you can see the king, the queen of England, etc. And then, of course, the Rothschild, the figure of the Rothschild, which is essential, etc. And this is an American ultra-right illustrator, David Dees. If you type David Dees on Google, you will be amazed. I think every day dedicate a new... and this man, according to him, the theory of the great replacement, the fact that there will be more and more Muslim and black people in Europe, is the Jewish conspiracy. The Jews, not the Jews, the Zionist weapon of European genocide, etc. And you can see that Merkel, etc., Cameron and Sarkozy, they are within the hand of the Jewish devil, etc. And they are preparing the end of their Sweden, or also they are through Europe, which of course they dislike. Don't Muslim have 3 times the children as white, and by 2050 whites will be the minority of their own country. And what is interesting to see is, according to this ultra-right, it's the Jews who is organizing this to destroy it, etc. As a revenge of what? I don't know. And this is my favorite president, President Macron, which I'm I'm fan of him, definitely. Ah, my God, he's a great man. And you see that Macron is supposed to be, the marionette of, again, the Rothschild on one side, and you can see he's got the Rothschild, insignia, and the Freemason. And what he's reading, because he had to destroy the white civilization, the protocol of the wives of Zion, etc. So you see it, of course, antisemitism, as I said, of course, it's a mutant virus, and it adapts itself with time to time, etc. And this was just published. It's a fresco who was painted in June, so not far ago, and you can see Jacques Attali, who used to be, he is a Jew politician, etc., but now he's on retreat, and he used to be the counselor of François Mitterrand, and this man is supposed to be, the master of Macron, represented as Pinocchio. And of course, people didn't understand how could this painting consider as anti-Semitic, of course. Okay, and so the Jews are the ideal scapegoat. That's, of course, and this is the only non-anti-Semitic, I think, thing I will show to you. This is Abel Pan, a very famous Jewish painter who will finally migrate to Israel. And he showed, the convenience of having Jews. It's just before the First World War. And you can see France accusing Germany, accusing Austro-Hungary, and then Germany accusing Britain, and Britain, Turkey, etc. And finally, everyone agrees. It's the fault of the Jews. And of course, the Jews is small, because we know that you will take a scapegoat. You won't take China as a scapegoat. You have to be crazy, because they have a fleet, etc. They're strong. They've got the money. So you say the Jews, knowing that they're weak, but you say they're strong. And this is the advantage of having Jews in your fridge. And so, of course, Germany lost the First World War, and so they invented the theory of the knife in the back. It was the fault of the Jews, of the banker Jews and the communist Jews, etc. And you can see that this is the so-called Austrian Revolution, Austrian Republic, and how does the Republic look like? It looks like a Jewish Republic. So it means the Jewish communists, the Jewish Bolshevik, the Jewish socialists, the Jewish Democrats destroy Austria and Germany, etc. And this is the same Jews, grave diggers, etc. I've got many of them. And in 1939, Wolf Hamburger, who was a young German who fled to France in 1933 and committed suicide in 1939, he was a brilliant cartoonist, and he explained the fact that the Jews were considered as scapegoat, etc. Everyone, putting the Jews as responsible of the coming of the Second World War, etc. This is like I have no time. And so the Jews had to explain what went wrong. And this is funny, because this is, for instance, an example of contemporary. What went wrong, and there was a debate on Egyptian television, and so Sheikh claims that there is a Jewish plot to decrease Egypt's population, and the political scientists claim that the plot is to increase it. At least they agree that the Jewish responsibility. And this is the essence of anti-Semitism, etc. Who cares? Anyway, it's the fault of the Jews, etc. This is the same, that also I'm working on Turkey, on the Armenian genocide, etc. And now you will find theory according to what that the genocide was a plan of the so-called damned Jews. It means the Jews who used to be converted after Shabtai Tzvi, if you know the story of the 17th century, etc. And it was a Jewish plot, not a Turkish plot, not a Muslim plot, but a Jewish plot, just to blame Turkey, etc. And even concerning football, I hate football, I like Macron, but anyway, when there was the problem of former FIFA vice president, and I will read it to you, former FIFA vice president Jack Warner has blamed Zionism for the circumstances that led to him and former Asian Football Confederation, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, who cares? I don't know anything about this story, but it's the fault of the Zionists. And this is important to remember, etc. Very strange. There was also a shark who was eating a German tourist in Sinai. And of course, the response of the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism was to say that the shark was trained by the Mossad to kill German tourists, of course, to destroy, of course, tourist industry in Egypt. And this is funny because this article was published in Belgium and it was not questioned. It was just published. Okay. But how to train shark to eat only German tourists? That's the question. And so conclusion, anti-Semitism doesn't tell us about Jews, but society in crisis or in profound change. It's a social disease, a collective psychosis. When I speak about anti-Semitism, not anti-Judaism, and this is very different, and I'll explain to you the difference, because you have to. Because you can cure from anti-Judaism. The proof is, the Pope is his best friend. And yes, it means that you can cure from a neurosis. You can cure. There are good relations now between Christianity and Judaism. You cannot convert, you cannot cure an anti-Semite. And this is a big difference. So the basic idea is Jews are responsible for the wars of the world. And the example is COVID-19. Who were responsible for COVID-19? Of course, there were a lot of, some people used to blame the Jews. And I've got a special conference dedicated to this, and I've got, hundreds of those kind of images, and I will show you a few of them, because you know, as I know. But the advantage of image, it goes to the essence of what I try to call. And of course, this is not a Chinese flu, it's a Jew flu, etc. And whatsoever, etc. And of course, why? Because it's the Rothschild who did organize it, because they wanted to get our money, they want to control our minds, whatsoever. The Rothschild and the Christ, etc. And there used to be in France a minister of health who used to be Jew. Her father was a survivor of Auschwitz, unfortunately just died 3 months ago, and she was accused of being responsible of COVID-19 virus, etc. And look how she was depicted. A representation dating back from the Middle Age. The fact that Jews are poisoning the well, etc. So you see that it's a cultural code which came in often and often. So the question now, it's the second part of my, I was too long maybe, it's the second part of my presentation. Now I have to explain why. Because I'm an historian, not a rabbi. So I have to try to explain why. And so this is important to stress. It's an hostility, and this is important. There is an exception. It will be like Alexandria, 1st century. Too complex. But it's an hostility limited to the Abrahamic religion. This is important to know. This explains why you can't find anti-Semitism in China, in India, or in the Roman Empire as such. And I speak about anti-Semitism, the fact that the Jews are responsible of the wars of the world. You cannot find this. Anti-Judaism, then anti-Semitism, should be considered with the precise temporal and spatial framework of the installation on both sides of the Mediterranean of Christianity and Islam. Why? The two religions directly born from Judaism, so rivals. It's a question of rivalry. It's a question of competition. Why? Because, you know, if you want to exist, sometimes you have to kill your father. Well, this is basic Freudian, etc. And because Judaism is the matrix of both Christianity and Islam. And so the logical opposition to the father will inspire the relationship between, the difficult relation between Judaism and the two religions. And let's remember, the first crime in the Bible, Abel et Cain, of course they never exist, but just it's a moral, it's a metaphor, Abel et Cain. The first crime in the Roman history, Romulus et Remus. The worst problem between people who look alike, between the Shiites and Sunnites, between the Protestant and the Catholic, between the Stalinist and the Trotskyist, etc. Brothers, etc. And so Christianity and Islam will logically come to oppose to their mother religion. And the problem what? What's the problem? Both Christianism and Islam claim the heritage of Judaism. The first Christian, they were Jew. They were praying like Jews, etc. Even St. Paul, even if some people will believe he invented Christianity, etc. But how could you claim to inherit from a person who does not acknowledge you, and above all, does not intend to die? They are still Jews, not so many, but still. So this is difficult to claim the heritage, etc. The second problem is the Gospel, as the Quran, are essentially based on biblical story. But as I said, biblical story, that the father of Islam, the father of Christianity, believed it was Jew, but we know, well, some of them were Mesopotamian and Sumerian, etc. And it means that those who refuse to disappear control the original and holy myth. And this is an example, you know, of Noah. Noah, you know, the story about Noah. Well, a Jew actually, a Jewish historian called Finkel, Erwin Finkel, fine, there are several. The story of Noah written 1,500 years before the Torah was written, because it's a myth within Gilgamesh story, etc. But nobody knows it then. So what is anti-Judaism? Anti-Judaism, not anti-Semitism. It's a neurosis. It's a problem of cognitive dissonance. And thank God I can read, because it's so easy to read. What is a dissonance cognitive? Dissonance occurs when a person is confronted with information that is not consistent with their beliefs. So it means the father of Christianity, they know that the myth, the concept, prophecy, apocalypse, whatsoever, are true. But how can you allege? So it's a problem. You know the difference between a psychotic and a neurotic. A normal person will believe that 1 + 1 means 2. A psychotic will believe that 1 + 1 means 3, a million, whatsoever. Well, what about the neurotic? A neurotic will believe that 1 and 1 means what? 2, but he doesn't like. He hates this truth. Yes, it means 2, but how can I cope with this? And so we will find how they will. There are strategies, etc. And when I say, for instance, this is an example of dissonance cognitive. If you read the Torah or if you read the Gospel or whatsoever, the Christian tradition, if you speak about the sacrifice of Abraham, of course he did sacrifice Isaac. This is written 1,000 years before the Quran. But in the Quran, not the Quran itself, but in the tradition, etc., they would say it's maybe Ishmael. And Ishmael is the first child, with Agar, his servant, etc. And of course, the problem is very important. If it's Isaac, it means the holy people are the Jews. If it's Ishmael, it's the Arabs. Even if, according to me, I'm sorry, I don't believe that it ever exists. But this is the way our ideology means. The same thing that the Roman, when they read Iliad, they say, Aeneas, it's our ancestor. He's not a Greek, but belonged to Greek civilization. And we revenge from the destruction of Troy. It's the same. We use what you use. The Buddhists, they use the Hinduist tradition. The Roman, they use the Roman tradition. And the Christian and the Muslim, they read the Bible. This is where they will find what they are, where they come from, etc. And so there is a very famous, oh my God, it's not so well done, But you have to, if you have one thing that you have to remember, it's a quote of a philosopher, French philosopher, and he said, "What's the origin of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism?" And this is a very simple quote. It's not me. Unfortunately, I didn't invent it. And it said, "The origin of the hatred is the hatred of origin. The origin of the hatred is the hatred of the origin." And this summarizes what anti-Judaism, then anti-Semitism, and finally anti-Zionism is. It's Daniel Sibony. Daniel Sibony. The origin of the hatred is the hatred of the origin. The fact that they belong, they own to the Jewish tradition, etc. And so there are always 4 stages of anti-Judaism. The first stage is identification. You know, the first time, the Muslims, they did pray to Jerusalem. They did fast on Yom Kippur. They did, in a sense, they believed they were Jews. And then, finally, the Jews, they didn't understand. The Jews of Medina didn't convert, didn't accept the message of the prophet. So strange. And then, of course, how could they refuse? And so there are morbid jealousy. And jealousy, this is a core. This means the difference between racism. Jealousy. They control, they control the myth, etc. They control the scripture, etc. And then it becomes hatred. And this is the case with Muhammad, the prophet, and this is the case also with Luther. Luther's origin was pro-Jewish. At the end, he wrote the first anti-Jewish book, The Jews and the Lies, etc. And which finally will bring the end of Jewish presence in Saudi Arabia, which is today Saudi Arabia. All the Jews were expelled, killed, or put into slavery, etc. And this is the execution of the Jewish tribe of Banu Qusayra, etc. The massacre of Khaybar, which still evoke, when there are demonstrations in Belgium against Israel, they will say, Khaybar, all the Jews to the gas, etc. This is in Brussels, in Belgium, what happens today. And so, yet, and this is the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism, yet, while being despised and attacked by the Jewish people for wearing at time the word of God, remains largely sacred, if not envied. You cannot cope with the Jews you will cope with adorateur of Isis, like, a philosopher, etc. Still, Jesus was a Jew. Still, more or less, Abraham did exist, etc. So, despite the hatred, Judaism cannot be treated as any pagan religion or belief. And for the Christian and Muslim, Judaism is an offense, but, however, not liable to death penalty, contrary to the heretic. So that's why I would say I disagree with my friend Charles. Anti-Judaism, it's not genocidal. Definitely not. And this is the big difference. This is not genocidal. To prove the goal is to convert, certainly not to kill the Jews, because they need the Jews, etc. Like I would say in French, un appartement témoin. They need it. And this is Saint Augustine. And I will explain to you why. For the Christian and Muslim, Judaism is an offense. As I said, that annihilation is not advocated by the father of church or even desire. And so they will find other solution. The first solution is, as I said, servitude and humiliation. A Jew is a necessary evil, an error in the service of truth. In the 4th century, Saint Augustine wrote that the Jews should not be killed, but condemned to dispersion and humiliation as a sign of the church victory over the synagogue. It's a kind of condemnation to eternal servitude that will be maintained for centuries. And of course, the classical example is, the wandering Jew, the one who refused to help Jesus during his calvaire to the Golgotha. And when I asked my students, what was the last state of Europe to recognize the state of Israel? Vatican, of course. Because for Vatican, it was something very difficult to accept. If you accept Israel, it means that this is caduc, it's finished, doesn't mean anything. And they accept it. You can cure from a neurosis. I think Freud would agree with me, definitely. And so, and it's the same with the Muslim, the Pact of Omar. Even if maybe it never exists as such, but the Jews also were put in a semi-servitude. They were not the equal of the Muslim, etc. They had to wear, yellow scarf or ceinture, I don't know how to say this in English, and also they have to pay taxes whatsoever. The synagogue should be smaller, and etc., than the mosque, etc. But still, they were within the Muslim city in an inferior. And this is, it's again, what I called anti-Judaism, etc. The second solution was, it was not enough, was criminalization. And the invention of the fact that the Jew destroyed and killed, Jesus, the Messiah, etc. The fact that the people of the Holy Alliance was responsible for Jesus' death, this is on the Christian side, but also the Muslim side. It's not the deicide, it's the prophetocide. It means the fact that the people of the First Alliance refused to recognize the last prophet and poisoned him. There are legends, hadiths, according to which a Jewish slave did poison the prophet, etc., and then he died 2 years after, etc. And you can still find this on the internet. It means it's still alive, those myths. The story of the empoisonment of the prophet, etc., the poisoned mutton of the Muhammad prophet, etc. So it's still there. That's why we have to speak about it, etc. And so for the fact that Arafat was accused of being poisoned, etc., it's within this tradition, etc., of the Jews poisoning, their enemies or whatsoever. I don't think they have Novichok, but then. The fact is, anti-Judaism is not genocide, doesn't mean it's not violent. Of course it could be violent. And when you see, when you read Chrysostom, John Chrysostom, you can see, you did slay Christ, you did lift violent hands against the master, etc. You did spill this prisoner's blood, etc. Or the synagogue is worse than a whorehouse. It is then a scoundrel and the repair of wild beasts, etc. It could be extremely violent. But it doesn't mean that before the 13th century there were no pogroms. And this is important to stress, etc. The third solution, and we spoke about it yesterday, was the Christian response is theology of replacement. In French we say substitution, maybe it exists also in English. And what is theology of substitution? We speak about it yesterday. The fact that, and this is a very classical representation of the synagogue and of the church, you can see that the synagogue, and you can see the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism. She is still a human being. She's a human being. She's even, I would say, more beautiful than a Christian. She's very beautiful, etc. She can be saved. How would she? If she convert. So what you don't like is the fact that within the person there is, this Jewish thing, but she can become a noble person by becoming a Christian, but she's blind. What does it mean? She doesn't know that Jesus is the Messiah announced by the Torah. It means that la lance, I think this is the lance, I've got it here, that's good. No, it's not in English. It's broken. It means that the alliance is broken, it's caduc, etc. There is no more the alliance between God and the Jewish people. And the Torah, well, it's still there. But it's we'll call the Older Testament, etc. It's still there, but it's, secondary, etc. So this is anti-Judaism, and you see the difference. And this is one of my favorite painter, Van Eyck, the Flemish painter Van Eyck. This is a painting that you can find in the Prado. It's called The Triumph of the Church and the Defeat of the Synagogue, and those are the Jews. And the Jews, look how they are. First, they look like Christians, in a sense. They dress like Christians, but Jewish head. And they don't want to listen. This is the great priest, and they don't want to hear, to see the fact that they lost. This is the replacement, etc., or substitution theology, etc. The Muslim, they will find another way. They won't engage themselves in the substitution theology. They will invent the falsification theology. What does it mean? Well, it means that, and this was, that the Quran, even if it was written, because I believe it was written like the Torah by human beings, etc., and I would say male human beings, it means that according to them it was pre-written, it was never written, it was there for eternity, etc., which means that they don't need the Torah anymore, and that the Torah and the Gospel and the Christian scripture are fake, because the real Torah announced Muhammad. The real New Testaments will announce Muhammad as the last prophet, etc. So, and this is what you can find on the internet. According to the Quran, the sacrifice cannot be Isaac. According to authentic Islamic tradition, the sacrifice is Ishmael. The Muslim scholars have solved this case a long time ago, and very early in the history of Islam, the popular Islamic tradition has integrated the fact that Ishmael was the sacrifice. Let the Christian missionary study the Quran thoroughly before calling upon ghosts that will frighten nobody but themselves. So it means that Abraham was already a Muslim prophet, Moses was Islamist, and also Isa, Jesus, was the equivalent of Jean, of Baptiste, who is supposed to announce Jesus. So what is Jesus? He's like Baptiste, who announced the venue of the Prophet Muhammad, etc. And this is what I call the falsification, etc. Consequence one. The Jews are once, and this is important to stress, totem, the people of Jesus, and taboo, the people who reject Jesus, etc., still envied, but despised and humiliated. Within the context, I will say, of anti-Judaism, but still sacred and useful. And this I have no time, because if not I will take 2 hours. In my lecture, usually it's more, it's, I would say 15 hours, etc. They were, just before the 13th century, they were useful, the Jews, because in a feudal society, economically they were useful. They were the middleman minority. They were, I would say, the embryo of tertiary sector till the 13th century. And then there will be the rise of national bourgeoisie who would like to take the position of the Jews, etc., etc. We have no time. The consequences too, 5 minutes, it's impossible. Let me take 10 minutes if you don't mind. The consequence too is the Jews are going to constitute the only minority tolerated within Christian and Muslim state, and they will become, and this is important to stress, gradually the usual suspect and the ideal scapegoat. 10 minutes if you don't mind. And
Sure.
yeah, it's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's exactly in the double context, theological totem and taboo, and sociological only tolerated minority, that the Jews will be gradually assigned to a triple role. Religious, the Jews as witness and curse, then economic, the Jews as foreign and economic agent, and finally, etc. I don't see. And sociopolitical, the Jews as an outlet or internal Christ, the scapegoat, etc. And so on this religious hostility to the Jews, but set up gradually as a cultural code, will arise at first traditional then modern antisemitism, then by a tortuous one and complex process, the Nazi antisemitism, and finally by a curious return of history, current new Judophobia and what I call radical anti-Zionism, etc. So to finish, not to finish, but really, but one shouldn't confuse between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism, and I will tell you the difference. Anti-Judaism contains Judaism for what it is, a rival and beside matrix face. The Jews are blamed for what they are. People opposing here the sanctity of the Christ, there of Muhammad. People are despised for what the real action and difference. They pray on Shabbos in a synagogue and not Friday in a mosque, on Sunday in a church. And you can see that the pivotal situation of the synagogue, of the Jews, compared to Friday and Saturday, etc. They celebrate Passover, not Easter, respect Yom Kippur, etc., etc. And so the quarrel, if you speak about anti-Judaism, is of theological order and, on the whole, logical. If we think about the exclusivism of the monotheist faith, monotheism are quite, I would say, but, and this is important, and I think at least I have to stress on this, the day side announced the psychosis, because, and the myth of Judah announces anti-Judaism. And I would say that the myth of Judah is maybe the first fake news. It's not Donald Trump who invent. It's, I'm sorry. It's the first fake news, according to me, is the myth of Judah. Because if you see the Last Supper, is there a Christian? Is there a pagan? They're all Jews. All the apostles are Jews, no exception. Jesus only met Jewish people. Well, the only non-Jew he met was Ponce Pilate. That's it. And the genius of the Latin, who will invent Christianity, those Roman people who finally took the church, was to say, well, it's not our ancestor who did it. It's not the Romans. It's the Jews who did it, etc. And they stressed on the man called Judah. And Judah means what? Judea. So it means the responsible of the death of the Christ, it's a Jew. But wasn't Jesus a Jew himself? Who cares? And you can see the difference with the beautiful lady that I show you, within context of anti-Judaism. This is different. He's not a man anymore. What you despise in the Jews is human beings. You can see that the Jews, dedicated himself to the devil, and this is his soul, And the goal of the Jews, and this is, and this I will agree with you, the goal of anti-Semitism is finally the killing of the Jews. They had to kill themselves. They have no choice. And in the tradition, Judas did kill himself, finally. And this is the fact that how do we represent, the martyrdom of the Jesus? The Jews are persecuted him, not the Romans. How could the Romans did? Because the goal was to convert the Romans. And so how could you say, well, we killed your God, but convert? No, you didn't do it, etc. And this is a Belgian, not really Belgium, but it means from Liège, which is now in Belgium. And this is very interesting. It shows what anti-Semitism is, not anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism? It's a Jewish plot. It's a conspiracy theory. This is the Sidrin, who, with the help of Judah, who did it for money, so already Jews and money, connection between the Jews and money, deliver Jesus to whom? Ponce Pilatus. But how is Ponce Pilatus represented? He's a Jew. Look, he's got the Jewish head. Eureka, as Archimedes would have said. Look, the same. And already you can see the difference between Jesus, a Jew, and the other Jew. Jesus looked like an Australian surfer. No? What do you think? Yeah. Of course. And the Jews, well, they don't look like, and especially not Ponce Pilate. My God, they've got such a nose. So it means that Jewish characterization dates back from the Middle Age, but after the 12th century, not before. Not before. There is a very, very, very good study by Lipton who demonstrate the origin of Jewish caricature, etc. And this is the same, etc. So anti-Semitism, religious inspired, 13th century. So even if the concept was invented in 19th century, anti-Semitism dates back from the 13th century. It was in the 13th century that the Jews were characterized as the responsible of the rule of the people, etc. So anti-Semitism is not born in the... It's born in the 12th, 13th century, not in 19th century, when the name was coined. And so... It's so strange why it's so small, yes, but it's not my last presentation. So the hatred of the Jews born in the wake of the Crusades is still religiously inspired, but distinguished itself by its totally irrational side. The difference between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism is the irrational side, etc. It's of fantastical order, etc. It's already a social construction. The neurosis turns into psychosis. It means it becomes an obsession, an obsessive patient, etc. And so why? Well, okay. And so as the Black Death epidemic devastated Europe in the mid-1914th century, annihilating more than half of the population, Jews were taken as scapegoat. So it means anti-Judaism plus minority, another wonderful presentation, etc. Wow. So, and this is important to remember, the Jews are hated not for what they do or really are, but what they do not do and are not. Evil creature with murderous practice, poisoning wells, killing children, spreading disease like plague. And this is the difference between anti-Zionism, and I would say criticism of Israel, and radical anti-Zionism. Israel is not responsible of the war of the world, and it's the same. You can see that anti-Semitism is to radical anti-Semitism, that anti-Israelism is to anti-Judaism, etc. Anti-Zionism is totally irrational, if you mean. Jews become responsible of the misfortune of the world, etc. Well, it is not my... Well, it's okay. And so there are massacre, accusing of, Non, non, non,
Blood
non.
libel? Blood libel?
Blood, no, this blood libel, like les hosties profanées.
It's host desecration.
Voilà, host desecration, etc. A lot of, and the core, of course, is killing children. And this is current, and this still, of course, is the core of anti-Israeli propaganda today. The Jews are targeting especially Palestinian children, and this dates back from the Middle Ages, etc. And I've got thousands of this. What is interesting to say that all the young children who were supposed to be killed by Jews, all of them became saints, and all of them were desacralized first by by Paul VI, and then Jean-Paul II, etc. And this is an example of course, a reaction of Christian and anti-Semitic Christian. It said réseau pédophile criminel, pédo-holocaust, the crime rituel, and of course this is Simon of Trento, and he's no more in the Christian calendar, because of course even the Pope knew it was ridiculous. When you know what kosher meat is, the fact that you need blood to make matzah, of course it's absurd. And of course the Pope and the Bishop, they knew that it was absurd, but there was a social demand, etc. So Jews have become useless, superfluous, and it's not it was not the origin. What is important to stress, that they will become to be expelled from Europe. The first expulsion was here in England, 1290, and the last was 2 centuries after. It was Portugal, 1497. It means that in the 1600, there were no Jews in Europe anymore. There were no Jews. Oui, no, it's okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Merci. And there were no Jews anymore in the 16th century. There were Jews in Holland, there were Jews in Turkey, there were Jews. Now 80% of the Jews, they were in Poland. And there were some Jews in Italy and some Jews in Germany. There were no Jews. There were no Jews in France, of course, in Britain, in England, in Spain, in Portugal, despite the fact that Jews now are accused of being responsible of slave tradery. The main slave, of course, they were Portugal, France, England, and Portugal, but there were no Jews there. But still, you will find Judas in France who will say the Jews were organizing the slave trade, etc. And this means that anti-Semitism is totally absurd. But it works, etc. And so what is important to know, when there were no Jews, who will become the scapegoat? When you had no Jews to explain the disaster and to explain the woe of the world. And this is the beginning of the sorcery. The fact that they had to choose another Jew, and they will find the women, etc. The women, the other Jews are the other minority. And so, of course, that the witches' hunt and the Jewish hunt are totally connected, etc. And it's after the expulsion of the Jew, not at the Middle Age, at the end of the Middle Age, etc. And the iconic hat of the witches, of the wicked witch, could reflect the association between black magic and the Jews. In 1431, Hungarian legal codes required first-time sorcery offender to walk among their peers in peaked Jewish caps. And this is the origin. And this is connected, because people need scapegoat. And if you don't have Jews, you will take. And so let's finish this. So, etc. The fact that, of course, poor and rich, of course, it will mutate. And what is racial anti-Semitism? It's just the reaction of an overly successful integration, just a scientific justification for the rejection in the context of de-Christianization, etc. Again, I show you this terrible thing. This is also a cartoon made in Britain. Imagine a Jew marrying a black lady, and the question is, what will be the harvest, etc. So you can see the level of hatred, etc. The same, this is a German postcard. You see a German marrying a Jew. Oh my God. Look at the children. And the same, you've got a German soldier in a colony in Africa marrying a black lady. Oh my God. So it means don't mix, etc. And again, the fact that the Jew, it means Deutschland should be, and it's written there, nach Palästina. Before the war, Jews has to go to Palestine. Now they have to go out of Palestine, etc. Die Zukunft nach Palästina, etc. Jews had to carry hotel forbidden to Jews, and it was written, Juden werden hier nicht geduldet. This is Germany before the First World War. This is an hotel, this is the publicity of an hotel. It says this hotel is an hotel without Jews, and it's a publicity. This is in America. You know, it was the same in America. This is a postcard edited by in Miami, etc. And this, in this beautiful colonial atmosphere, restricted clientele. It means forbidden for Jews. Another hotel, and this is another hotel. And it's strictly for Gentile clientele, etc. And this is in your country, in Quebec. Notice, Jews are not wanted here in Saint Agathe. So scrim while the going is good, etc., etc., etc. And so this ideal, etc., etc., etc. As you know, the fact that the Jews were supposed to be connected with the communism, etc., with the Freemason, etc. And I will more or less stress with this: what is anti-Semitism? It's a rejection of modernity. This is important to say, because modernity makes the Jews, the gays, the women free. We are the beneficiary of modernity. Imagine where we were before. Thank God. We can be in Oxford because of modernity. Equality of rights. Before, there were no women allowed to study, to be professor, to be minister, to be head of the European Commission. No. And the same for the Jews. So for the anti-Semite, they blamed the Jews because they were the beneficiary, but nobody would blame the female. They're not clever enough. My God, how could the female invented modernity? Of course not. And this is a postcard edited by White Russian, and they say, my God, what do they do in Britain? What is the price of tolerance? You emancipate those people. What they give us? Communism, Bolshevism, trade unionism, propaganda, socialism, finance, occultism, trade unionism, cinema. This is true. This is true. Hollywood, pacifism, feminism. And you see that anti-Semitism, has nothing to do with the Jews. It's a criticism of modernity. And it's the same today. When you can see that, etc., and I will show you today. No, c'est fini. That in the Arabic world today, they will say, well, the Jews are responsible for freedom and democracy make in Denmark, etc. McDonald's is a Jewish Zionist plot. McDonald's, it's not kosher. McDonald's is a Jew because it's, well, drink Coca-Cola, it's to support Israel. Pepsi, you know what it means? Pay every pence to save Israel. and it's finished. Gaddafi is a Jew. You know it? He was a Jew. Gaddafi is a Jew. Daesh is a Jew. The real man al-Baghdadi is Simon Elliott. I don't know what happened with this poor man. I suppose he was killed. And then you know that also Assad is a Jew, a Hasidic Jew. Mohamed Morsi, Ghanouchi, Ghanouchi, etc. And so Egyptian journalists on NBC, President al-Sisi, mother is Jewish, and tell you that he's a Jew who is tied to the Jews. Guys, all his actions are Jewish. Everything he does is for the Zionists, etc., etc. And this is also in French. It's not only the Arabic world. This is in France. The mother of al-Sisi, is she Jewish, etc.? And even, you know, the famous Atatürk, of course, is a Jew, Kemal Atatürk, etc. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Voilà. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to be so long.
Thank you, Joel. So we have 20 minutes for comments and questions. Chloe.
It's too long. We'll concentrate like a camp.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
No. Thank you so much. Please allow me to pose a challenge to your distinction between neurotic and psychotic models and
Okay, of course.
anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. And I think it's really important because this has dire consequences for the way that we approach this phenomenon. Because you suggest that the myth of deicide lies at the origin of the psychotic model.
You understand me very well.
Thank you, but that it's actually not true because the myth of deicide, if we are to zoom out and understand it as instead the myth of parricide or the death of the father, the murder of the father, is actually the myth of the neurotic psychical structure. So we can think about it in terms of Hamlet and Oedipus. Oedipus fulfilling the model, Hamlet denying the model, and then thinkers such as Jean-Francois Lyotard suggest that
that explains the difference between the Greek and the Jew in mythical terms. The Greek is the one who fulfills the neurotic model, and the Jew is the one that doesn't. This then leads to repression, and the question of existence, to be or not to be, am I alive or dead, which lies at the heart of neurosis. Psychosis is actually the denial of the myth of parricide, the idea that the father cannot be killed, the father is never killed, the word of the law or of God or of the father is actually restructured in a process called foreclosure. So I would actually suggest that it's the inversion. And to suggest that psychosis and neurosis can transition from one to the other, I would also challenge, because they're psychical structures to do with the relation to the other. So I was just wondering if you could please expand on the distinction between psychotic and neurotic models relating to anti-Semitism.
Okay, this is what I tried to do actually. Thank you very much for your mark, very clever. But what is important to say, if I make a distinction between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism, the fact is, first one is, I would say, a rational opposition. That's it, rational. And the fact that Christians oppose the Jews, as actually the Jews oppose the Christian, you know, what you can find in Talmud about Jesus is, well, also special, etc. So this is, of course, I'm constructed. What I say, my discourse is constructed, etc. So it's not in a perspective that you are. You seem to be very well aware of those reality. But after my definition, one is rational, the other one is irrational. And the fact that people has accused the Jews, the centrality of the deicide, which is, according to me, it's a lie. It's a fake news. It's something which is not the reality, because definitely the Jews are not responsible of the killing of Jesus. This is the only thing I wanted to stress about it. And you have to understand my definition, my point of view about it. But I fully agree with you. It's very clever. And if you will advise me to have some readings, I would be very, very much interested to read it. But according to my model, this is what I wanted to stress. The fact that we pass from the rationality to the irrationality, and I think which prepare it, according to me, is the myth of Judah. The fact that maybe Judah never exists, and then they invented this man called Jew as responsible of the death, which is the crime of the crime. It's the crime of the crime. It means the assassination of the Messiah, etc. And this is important, because the rest, according to me, if my lecture of Freud whatsoever, unfortunately I haven't read Lyotard, in which actually is French, but according to my lecture, to my comprehension, the rationality, anti-Semitic is totally irrational, which makes us almost impossible to fight it whatsoever. And for me, this is the breakthrough which brings to this. But I very much enjoy your remark.
I have a follow-up. I would perhaps suggest that this question of irrationality would also extend to a neurotic reading of anti-Semitism, because it's in relation to like the modes of repression which follow their own internal logic, which may be twisted. I would argue that there is a distinct thread of logic in psychosis. I think, to quote your example back to you, I think you'd find a lot of neurotics who would say that 1 + 1 = 4.
Theoretically, no, but this is not what it teaches in medical school. But I suppose it exists.
Okay.
I suppose it exists, but
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I found it fascinating because in Jewish studies, of course, there are tremendous debates about the periodization of anti-Judaism versus anti-Semitism. And the demarcation is different than where you're positioning things. And one of the things that I think is really interesting with the scholarship now is the way that we're reading the ancient world and early Christianity in terms of race and blood. And of course, I'm thinking of the work of Paula Fredrickson and David Bial and people like that. And Susanna Heschel's arguments about what's anti-Judaism, what's anti-Semitism, because if you make it the hard split later than you do with the Nazis and with modernity and kind of racial theory, you're missing a lot. So I really appreciate the way you're going back and forth. I was curious about kind of a very quick move you made about the Black Death, because I can see why that's so important in the history of violence against Jews. But of course we have in around 1096, the First Crusade.
Of course,
and the
I have no
Hebrew
time.
Bibles.
Definitely,
So,
yes, sure.
So where is the violence
Sure.
coming from? Why
Okay.
with the First Crusades are they going through the Rhine and killing Jews?
That's why it's the beginning of what I say anti-Semitism. It's 11th, 12th century with the Crusades. The
But what's
first
the trigger?
pogroms, it's exactly at this moment. 10,000 Jews were killed in the Rhine, you know, le Rhin, the river Rhine, etc. This is the beginning. And the rest, after 14th century, it's after, of course. But this is the beginning because, of course, because there are always footnotes whatsoever. One footnote will be the pogrom of Alexandria during Philon, Alexandria. And already there you will find in Appian, they will say that the Jews are responsible of the misfortune of Egypt. So there is already maybe anti-Semitism there. And this is interesting. And but unfortunately, when you have only 1 hour, it's quite, you have to summarize. And you know, this is very difficult. And the rest, of course, is the fact that there is a break, and I would say the majority of the historians, I think, agree with me. I think it's not 19th century. It will be
Yes.
I would say the 12th century with the Crusade. Why? First, there was the problem of comment on dit, the fear of the end of the time, the coming of the Antichrist. The fact the Crusaders, they were fighting Muslims, and they say, well, we are fighting infidels, but we have infidels within ourselves, and even worse, the one who killed Jesus, etc. So let's start with them. And you know that if you kill a Jew, you could also go directly. You could also go directly to the heaven. You don't have to go you don't have to kill a Muslim. You can start here, etc. And so this is the beginning. And before 1100, there were no pogrom as such. Even if you have the precedent of Spain, Visigothic, but my God, it's too long. You know, this is the problem. Is there's a gentleman there, and maybe we can. I'm sorry, I'm not the chief here.
Fascinating talk. Thank you very much for very enlightening. I love cartoons, of course, and
You're.
since you come from Belgium, we still have that discussion about the Chao Congo, but that's for another story.
I agree, but I criticize it.
No. But yeah, back to the question about the rational, your model about the rationality of anti-Judaism and the rationality of anti-Semitism. I wonder really how much that may be also influenced by your secular, let's say, kind of perspective, in the sense that my understanding of any identities, and this is based on quite a number of readings as well, any identities collective in terms of a constructivist, at least perspective as well, is that somehow when hatred is involved, there's this element of, let's say, irrationality anywhere. You hate the person not because necessarily you know that person, but because of a certain given attribute, real or imagined, that you attribute to that person. So that identity may be so-called innate, groups in terms of descent, a Jew as someone who has Jewish descendants, or a black, and so on. Or it may be religious, belonging to this religion that I don't really know very well. So my idea is how much really rationality there is in hating Judaism as opposed to hating a Jew, because all, to my mind, would be around attribute to any given identity, be it religious or descent-based.
I will be very short because there are many questions, and I think your remarks are more interesting than my answer. According to me, anti-Judaism is the hate of Judaism as such, and anti-Semitism is the hate of the Jews. And you hate the Jews as a concept, and it could be a concept of modernity or religion, like we spoke yesterday about Aufklärung, anti-Semitism, etc. So we can speak a lot about it. Let's have another question.
Bonjour, monsieur. Merci beaucoup for a fascinating talk.
Speak in French, even.
Oh, yeah, barely. Just a couple of things. I'm curious to know your views on Jean-Paul Sartre's notion. If the Jew did not exist, the anti-Semite would invent him. I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on that. Secondly, I'm going to share some of my, take this from the angle of where I research and write about, which is multiculturalism in Western Europe. A lot of the stuff at the beginning of your talk was about race replacement theory, how Jews are the spearheads of this, replacing white populations with ethnic minority groups and so on. I'm curious to know, do you think social democrats or centrists in Western Europe have a responsibility to address the reasons why many people in Western Europe are now going towards Marine Le Pen or Monsieur Zemmour or to the AfD in Germany, these populist right reactionary political movements, in order to combat anti-Semitism. In other words, do you see that these movements are do you see that these anti-Semitic movements, or movements which have elements of anti-Semitism with them to varying extents, are a reaction of widespread disillusionment with centrism, globalism, and multiculturalism in Western Europe?
My God, it's a good question. How would you think that I can
I know it's
answer?
a good
I think
question,
he
that's
did
why I
answer in his conclusion. But concerning Jean-Paul Sartre, I just read it, and unfortunately, it's fascinating, and I think I agree totally with him. If the Jew didn't exist, they will have to invent it. And this quote was also attributed to the mayor of Vienna, who actually was a great anti-Semite, because it's useful, because it's a weapon that you can use, because it's an easy weapon. And I would say, I won't blame the social democrats or the liberals, because the Jews actually are connected to liberalism, etc. And we are, and the problem of the Jews are the extreme whatsoever. And it's the same actually in Israel, because I consider myself, for instance, certain leaders of Israel, like Ben Gvir, according to me, they are extremists, if not fascists, etc. as such. So it exists everywhere. So all friends are the liberals and social democrats, the modern people, etc. They try what they do. But in those times of irrationality, people are looking for, in complex situations, for simple answers. And the simple answer is the Jews are responsible for the COVID-19, etc. The Jews are responsible for the economical crisis, etc. It works. And this is what Shulamit Volkov, the Israeli, said. It's a cultural code. And it's written in, I would say, DNA, and I agree with him, of Christianity since the 2nd century. And this is the problem. How could we fight with this tradition? I don't know. By organizing seminars? In Oxford or in Cambridge?
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome. I'm just wondering if there is a merging. So you're coming from like a secular perspective of historic anti-Semitism. The good rabbi last evening is coming from a biblical perspective. Can we see I don't know what you'd call it, like a God perspective in this? Someone once said, the Jews brought the God-given moral law into the world, and for this they've never been forgiven. So could it be that because of what the Jews represent historically?
Okay, it's a good question.
Can we merge?
Yeah.
Can we merge the secular with the religious and find truth in both?
It's a very good question. I would say no, but I would say yes. Because what is important is not the reality, but the belief of reality. What is important is not what the reality is, what people believe the reality is. People believe that the Jews, in a sense, is true. Without God, we bring... Judaism is orthopraxis, it's not orthodoxy. And it's true. That's why I'm a dedicated Jew. I'm a secular, dedicated Jew. I'm a Jew every morning, every minute of every second of my life. You can be a Jew and atheist, to answer to Felix. I'm an atheist Jew, but I'm a Jew. And it means that I believe that we have values like the Greeks, actually, like the Italians, and we are special people. And it's true that for the Germans, say we did represent something that should be annihilated. And this is the important thing, the belief. And even if people believe we invent modernity, we have to accept it. We have to be, and this was the problem of the Jews in the 30s, like the inventor of Congrès Juif Mondial, European World Jewish Congress, was Nahum Goldman. He was a German, he was rational, and he said he couldn't understand Nazism. And he said after the war, sorry, I had not the imagination of Himmler. But an historian, we need to have the imagination of Himmler and of Ayatollah Khamenei. That's a problem. We have to. So we have to be careful. I hope you did understand what I tried to say. But.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yes? Okay, good. You have to reassure me about my English.
It was fun.
I actually have a comment. First of all, thank you for this lecture. I think it's really amazing how you managed to bring so much of it together. so much of history. And the one thing that was missing for me among the cartoons, I'm also collected cartoons.
Good.
But
We'll exchange.
absolutely, yeah, Soviet cartoons, because the Soviet Union produced such a vast volume, and I think it would have.
Efimov.
Was that?
Efimov.
He was one of the people,
Yeah.
but it was much bigger than that. And I think it would have illustrated the point that you made about this obsession and irrationality
Mhm.
also appearing on the side of hatred for Israel.
Mhm.
And those cartoons.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So I will include it in my lecture. I wasn't planning on it, but I will include a few just to illustrate.
I'm originally more or less a Sovietologist, so that's why. But well, specialist on communism and European integration. But then, I was obliged to interest myself in anti-Semitism. You know, necessity makes law, as we say.
Okay, so on that note, on behalf of everybody here, Professor Kotek, merci beaucoup.
It was-
Very informative as usual. Thank you.